Hello and welcome. My name is John Hawkes and I am the Janes Land Manager, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this online intelligence briefing today. Oscar Widland, who is the lead editor for Janes Armour, Artillery and Air Defence, will present a session entitled Ground Vehicle Markets. But just before I hand over to Oscar, I would like to highlight that the information used to compile today's presentation has been drawn from a variety of Janes content, but particularly Janes Defence Industry and Markets, including the Markets Forecast Military Ground Vehicles product, as well as the Janes Defence Procurement Combat Vehicle Programs product, and Janes Land Warfare Platforms, Artillery and Air Defence. Now over to Oscar for the presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oscar Widland. I'm a Senior Analyst for Land Warfare Platforms in the Janes Land team, and Lead Editor of Janes Land Warfare Platforms, Artillery and Air Defence. In this presentation, we will be looking at a summary of the military ground vehicles market over the next 10 years, and then look at the individual segments of that market in more detail. We'll then look at the top end-user countries and some of their military ground vehicle programs, before going on to the main trends and drivers that are influencing vehicle development and spending in the future. The overall military ground vehicle market is relatively flat and stable in line with the enduring requirement for military ground vehicles, with $539 billion estimated to be spent over the forecast period between 2018 and 2027. There is some midterm growth that then goes away to reflect long-term uncertainty in the market, as well as reflecting that some programs have been pushed up. The total compound annual growth rate, or CAGR, for the first 5 years is 8.7%, although this falls to 1.5% over the whole forecast period. The overall production units for the period is forecasted at 452,750 units. On the slide, the grey line shows the market forecast without PIGO applied. PIGO are proprietary deflators that apply realism to the market and give a more realistic picture. It is based on analysis from Janes on the probability and likelihood that orders will go ahead. With PIGO turned off, you can see a more optimistic view of the market, which is larger at $633 billion and has a stronger growth of 3.6%. If you are more of a realist and accept that not all programs can or will be funded, then the PIGO figure gives a more conservative and realistic view of future spending. All figures quoted in this presentation going forward are taken with our PIGO deflators applied. So, moving on to the major market segments, this staked graph shows a breakdown of military ground vehicles, which we have split up into 4 major segments: armored fighting vehicles, or AFVs, self-propelled artillery, air and missile defense vehicle, and logistic support vehicles. Now we'll first take a look at the armored fighting vehicle market, which includes infantry fighting vehicles, or IFVs, armored personnel carriers, or APCs, tanks, surveillance and reconnaissance vehicles, and anti-tank vehicles. Please note that we have not included specialized vehicles such as MBC or recovery vehicles in this segment. As shown on the graph, the market is relatively flat with some midterm growth and has an overall CAGR of 2.8% over the forecast period. Production units are forecast to rise from just above 9,000 units in 2018 to a peak of over 11,500 units in 2024, before dropping again to around 9,000 at the end of the forecast period in 2027, meaning that the overall production units for the forecast period is 107,800 units. This reflects the range of procurements and upgrades that are scheduled to take place in the mid-part of the next 10 years. The armored fighting vehicle market can be further broken down, as we said earlier, go into the different armored fighting vehicles that we forecast for currently. So the IFV market has the highest CAGR of 4.1% over the forecast period, with an overall total program value of $89 billion and a total of 29,900 production units. This is followed by the APC market, which has a CAGR of 4%, and a total program value of $88 billion. There are 51,600 forecasted production units. It's worth noting that the line between APCs and IFVs have continued to become blurred due to the increasing adoption of low-profile, high-caliber, remotely operated weapon systems, also known as RAWs, that are capable of being mounted onto APCs without penetrating significantly into the crew compartment. This means that the traditional distinction between IFVs and APCs, with the former being lower capacity and generally with a larger armament, and the latter being high capacity but with a minimal armament, is no longer always the case. This graph, moving on, shows the top 10 buyers in the military ground vehicles markets, with the United States and China being by far the largest spender on military ground vehicles. We're now going to look at some of these individual countries in more detail and some of the military ground vehicle programs they have going on right now. The United States is always a top spender on combat systems, and military ground vehicles are no exception to this. A lot of future US spending will be based on upgrading existing vehicles, notably the M1A2 Abrams main battle tank upgrade, the Paladin M109A7 self-propelled howitzer program. There are also new vehicle programs such as the Joint Light Tactical Vehicle, or the JLTV, that is designed to replace the Humvee. For China, moving on, a major modernization thrust has been to improve mechanization of the army through light mobile forces, and key programs of the Chinese army include the Type 99 A2 main battle tank and the ZBD-5 amphibious assault vehicle, of which an estimated 350 vehicles of all variants have already entered service. It is worth mentioning that China is a lot more difficult to forecast for compared to other countries due to the opaque nature of the country and limited transparency of procurement processes. India has several major military ground vehicle programs, such as the Akash surface-to-air missile system, which was officially accepted for service with the Indian Army in May 2015, and other future programs include the Future Main Battle Tank and Future Infantry Combat Vehicle, to replace its fleet of aging BMP-1 and BMP-2s. However, these would be Make India programs that only allow for foreign participation in the domestic design. The last trend I want to look at is the blurring distinction between infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. As already mentioned in the earlier presentation, the armored personnel carrier and the infantry fighting vehicle boundary have been heavily eroded, particularly in the 8x8 market. The traditional differentiating characteristics that separated these two no longer really apply, and many vehicles can perform both roles or be rapidly converted in theatre with flexible mission fits. This is due to the low-profile, high-caliber weapon systems that are capable of being mounted on APCs without penetrating into the crew compartment. The slide above shows the example of the AMV armored personnel carrier that had a crew of 2 with 9 dismounts and an armament of a 12.7mm remotely operated weapon station, compared to the Patria AMV IFV demonstrator that had a crew of 3 with 8 dismounts and a 30mm remotely operated weapon station. Again, the graph demonstrates how the armament of APCs have increased.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Oscar. We look forward to welcoming you to our future briefings. The next online briefing, which is on heading for the exit, defence and the UK's departure from the European Union, is going to be held on Thursday the 28th of June, and that is at 1500 UK, 1000 EDT. Thank you very much, and goodbye.